Where would we be without the various products delivered by the men and women in the trucking industry? Healthy Conversations in Trucking podcast is a platform for professional long-haul truck drivers to share their journeys over the road, educating listeners about the trucking industry and lifestyle. Now, let's dive into the conversation on this brand new episode. Greetings, everyone. This is Dr. Huntley. I'm your host today, and I'm excited that you've joined me on this episode. In a moment, I'm going to connect my conversation with our guest, whose name is Dr. Mark Manera. He's going to share with you his passion for the population of truck drivers, the professional men and women who choose this occupation, and we want to support you. Like myself, he is not a truck driver, but he's very much interested and genuinely connected to the community. He's going to explain it all in our conversation, but I just wanted to lightly introduce to you before I connect that conversation. Also, if you listen carefully at the end, he will share his connection information, the website, and how you can find him if you're interested in learning out more about what he offers, what his company does. If you want to share that with the company that you drive for, or maybe you are a trucking company owner, or you are looking for the type of support that he offers to help your drivers. At the end, I do ask him for some specific tips and bits of advice that anyone listening can apply right away. So there's a little bit of something for everybody in this episode. So I am going to connect my conversation with Dr. Manera right now. Well, I'm excited to introduce everyone to our guest on this episode. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mark Manera. So how are you today, Mark? Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, Charlotte, thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great. I'm excited for this conversation. And thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, I thought I was really excited to jump into this. You and I've talked a little bit about our interests. Just for the record, neither one of us are truck drivers, but we're both very interested in this population. So I thought this would be a great conversation for us to have on the podcast. So let's start out with just introduction. Tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. And actually, I always lead with I'm not a truck driver, because I want to make sure, just like you just said, that it's very clear and out in the open of, hey, I come from the medical and health and fitness background, and I think there's a lot of advantages to that. But I think, part of that and not having the background as a driver is that I really have to have an open mind and have a lot of conversations with drivers and really spend and do my homework and spend time understanding their lifestyle and being open to criticism and open to different ideas that, so we can build something really special that fits into the lifestyle of drivers. And so I appreciate that. And I guess I rambled there for a little bit, but like you said, my name's Dr. Mark Manera. I'm the founder and CEO of Supply Chain Fitness. It was formerly called the Trucking Fitness Company. And we're really focused on helping make the supply chain a healthier place to work. I think from drivers to people in the office to, people in the warehouse and the shop, there's a lot of people who, because the supply chain and trucking literally moves our country and our economy, it's really easy to put your health on the back burner and not make it a priority. And I think that's really sad. And I think that there's a way to fit it into your lifestyle and make it, something that your health and your longevity is not being affected because of your career. And, I always say right now, deep down in my heart, I don't think anyone's career should define their health. And I think for a lot of drivers out there, particularly, I think, unfortunately, that's what's happening. And, our mission is really to aid, coach, and give drivers the resources they need to live a healthier life out on the road.
I appreciate that. This reminds me, and I know that the listeners of the podcast they're familiar with me and a little bit of my research background. But when I was working on my doctorate, I specifically studied the population of long haul truck drivers. A lot of that had to do with my husband, who was, over the road, and he was really suggesting that I study this population. I was interested in obesity and comorbidities, so diabetes and high blood pressure conditions that are kind of associated. So I was really looking into that population in particular, and I discovered a lot of the same, like what you were describing, often overlooked, which was really heartbreaking for this really important industry. And when I did the research, though, the one thing that stood out, or what we call statistically significant findings, had to do with physical activity. And, that positively, like, associated with, long sitting and the restrictions on exercise, not a matter of motivation, but, the lack of access to safe places to walk, or, places to really exercise and work out. And when I met you and I really kind of initially discovered what you were doing, that really was one of the reasons I got really excited about bringing you onto the podcast. But also, so far in all the conversations I've had with drivers, that comes up as one of the biggest challenges is they'll talk about the access to healthy food, but often being able to exercise and, options. And again, another reason why I was really excited to hear from you and to bring you on the podcast. I think that I've been chatting along on these episodes enough, but just in case someone is hearing us for the first time, I think it's nice to know, like you said, that perspective of almost a humbling. How can I serve this population without really understanding the challenges that happen in and day out, beyond just what I know of my husband and a couple of his friends, but to really, build connection and relationship with people more broadly.
Yeah. And I had, unfortunately, I don't have a spouse who's in trucking. I don't actually, now being in the industry and kind of diving fully into it, now realizing that, a lot of people have trucking in their blood, and they, have generations of trucking throughout their family of, grandparents, parents, and then they fell into it. And I just didn't have that experience. And so my first time actually working with drivers was rehabbing them in a physical therapy clinic. And I honestly just saw firsthand what, 20, 30 years of not making your health a priority can do to someone. And I was just really shocked. And that was my first time, I'm not sure, Charlotte, have you ever been to physical therapy before?
I have. Yeah.
Okay. So, it's not like going to your MD or, your family physician where, they're in and out in 5 minutes and you don't really build a relationship. I got to know the drivers, and honestly, there was a couple that I became really good friends with and I really enjoyed working with. And that was my first experience, honestly, learning about the lifestyle, learning about the industry as a whole. And I was just really inspired from some of the sacrifices and the impact that they have on our economy, like I mentioned earlier, but also just intrigued with the unique barriers and that kind of the lifestyle sets up when it comes to trying to eat healthier and exercise. And I look at it as, anyone anywhere can find a way to live a healthy life. But based off of your circumstances, there are barriers that set up that you have to hop over, if you want to make the analogy of a mountain that you have to climb over. And I think that there's just a lot of barriers and unique struggles that drivers face out on the road that just make it a lot more difficult than you and I who, work in 9 to 5 and are home every evening, especially the over the road drivers. And so I just was really inspired to say, hey, I need to do something about this. I really saw a gap in the industry of driver specific health and fitness coaching and resources. And, I think, now talking to a lot of drivers, they can smell BS and they can smell when someone doesn't understand their lifestyle and doesn't, if something is just a Google search and kind of just handed to them and it was clearly not built for them, they can smell that out. And I wanted to be able to create something for drivers that smacks them in the face and says, hey, this was built for me, and giving them the ability to take ownership of their health out on the road.
Yeah. So how did you, when in your first interaction in clinic, working with drivers, how did it kind of shift from that to where you are now? How did you decide to build here and stay here?
Yeah. So, as a physical therapist, one of the questions that I ask a lot of people is, throughout the rehab process, it's like, so, hey, how often do you exercise, or what do you do for your health and fitness? And, the typical response that I get from people is, I probably should be doing more than I currently am. Or, yeah, my doctor said I should be exercising more. And yeah, so there was one particular driver that I was working with in the clinic, and he was, 38 years OTR driver who, had been in the industry basically his whole life, and, had some of the typical now that I see that are very common in drivers, which is he was overweight, he was diabetic, and he actually just had a total knee replacement. And that's what I was rehabbing him for. And so, there was a lot of time where I spent stretching him out, making sure that his knee was getting back straight and fully bent. And, during that time, I just learned a lot more about the industry. And I learned, just hearing the sacrifices he made on a day-to-day basis when it came to his, when it came to his family, when it came to his quality of life, and all of these different things. And, when I kind of was thinking back on those, stories and kind of seeing, those statistics on, hey, he's going to make all these sacrifices day to day and, away from his family. And then by the time he retires, gets to enjoy the fruits of his labor, he gets 16 years cut off the back end. And I just, like I said earlier in the podcast, don't think anyone's, career or job title should define their health, and especially define how long they live. And I just felt like, someone had to do something about it. And I decided to jump all in and start Supply Chain Fitness.
That's so inspiring for me to hear, because that resonates. And I mean, to me, it's like, how can we just, let this kind of passively happen to one of the most important professions? I mean, the men and women that make this, like you said, choose this career and make all the sacrifices that are involved to keep our country moving. And they are, choosing this profession and sacrificing their health, and it shouldn't be that way. So I definitely get it. And I'm glad to hear that from you as part of your decision. Wow. Okay. So tell me a bit more about how you help, because in my mind, I'm thinking, of course, when I was in physical therapy, I would go a couple times a week, into the clinic and do all the work. And so how do you help drivers who are over the road and probably can't even get in to see you on a regular basis like that?
Yeah. And so, I'm a trained physical therapist, and that's what my degree is in. My profession. From a supply chain fitness standpoint, we're really focused on the preventative side of things, and, the baseline health and fitness. And so we kind of have three big pillars: exercise, nutrition, and accountability. And those are the three that we're really focused on, and really building something out that drivers or anyone in our program can do anywhere at any time, and trying to cut away all of those barriers that we talked about earlier in the podcast. And what we have an app right on the driver's phone, and it's really easy to use. I know that some drivers are not the most technological, so we've built it where, it's not, rocket science, and it's super user friendly and easy to navigate. And, what we do is each member starts with a one-on-one onboarding call with one of our coaches. We build that relationship, which I think is honestly really important, especially with, a lot of drivers feeling isolated out on the road and not feeling like they have a lot of people on their team. And, we really want to show each of our members that, hey, there's a coach here that's going to push you when the time's right, and also going to, understand the difficulty that, life is out on the road, and sometimes have that empathy and, just understand what you're going through and be able to work through it with you. And, we make sure that we place you in a program that's based off of, number one, your current fitness level. two, what you enjoy doing from an exercise standpoint. Because, me personally, if someone told me to go run a couple miles, I would say no, thank you. If you see me running, you should be running as well, because something's chasing me. And so finding something, I think, especially at the beginning, that people enjoy doing, even if it's some stretching, if it's some a circuit training, or if it is some type of just go on a walk and you want some accountability around that. We place them in that program, and then we give them all the equipment they need. So we give every member a free resistance band, so it's easy to store in your truck. If something crazy happens out on the road, I've heard scary stories of, an accident happening and a driver has a 20-pound dumbbell in the back of their truck and it turns into a projectile, and we don't want that to happen. And we don't, I don't think there's any reason to have to carry around any extra stuff that you don't need to. So a resistance band with some creativity and some guidance really can turn into any exercise. And then, finally, we put them in a program where they want to do it at. And so our most popular program is the In the Truck program. It actually got started when I first started this, talking about just not being a driver and really, wanting feedback from drivers. As we had a beta group of 20 drivers that went through the program, and every week I went on a phone call with them and just got feedback on, hey, how can we make this program better? And one of the drivers, her name's Blake, and she's awesome. She's still a member today. And one of the things she talked about early on was the first version of our program was just an out of the truck program. And she said, well, hey, I don't feel comfortable and safe outside of the truck at certain locations. And so is there any way I can do it in the truck? And I was like, yeah, let's build it out. And so we've built out, we recorded a bunch of videos, and we, built out an in the truck program. And so that's actually our most popular program, where, drivers can do, some exercise right in the back of their bunk. And we've got stuff out of the truck, in the truck, or at home. And a lot of, local drivers we have doing it at home. And then also, some office staff, warehouse, and the shop as well, doing it at home. And so from an exercise standpoint, that's really what we offer. And then, on the nutrition side of things, just my personal experience, I think drivers, but our culture in general, oftentimes takes this all or nothing approach. It's like, I'm going to dive into this diet. I'm going to change everything about what I'm eating tomorrow, and I'm going to restrict everything everything under the sun. And you end up holding on for about 7 days or a week, and then you fall back to square one. I know I found myself doing that as well in the past. And so, when you add trucking on top of that, it just adds another dynamic of, this is not setting you up for success in the long run. And, I really think that health goes with you for the rest of your life. And so day one, let's set this up in a realistic and, sustainable way that you can do this for the rest of your life. And we've, from a nutrition standpoint, really taken a habit-based approach and really focus on building one habit at a time. Let's find stuff that you can do anywhere at any time that fits into your day-to-day life versus trying to, make a 180 flip to your day-to-day life day one. And once it becomes a regular part of your routine, let's just start stacking other healthy habits on top of it and building up those small wins. And honestly, something we say, our internally is like, hey, how can we get drivers to do a little bit of a head fake and say, like, am I even doing anything? Is this, am I even doing anything? Because it's just such a small change. And, I think there's a lot of power to that. And there's a lot of power on, doing one small change consistently for, months, and the impact that can have on, losing weight, feeling more energized, and also just feeling like, it just becomes routine and a habit. And that's really our goal. And we also, have restaurant guides and truck stop guides and grocery store shopping lists, and really focused on, out on the road, there are a lot of things that drivers can't control. And when you look at it, from that frame of mind and say, man, look at all these things that I can't control. It's really easy to say, screw it. I'm just not going to do anything about it. And what we try to do with our drivers is say, hey, let's shift that mindset and say, hey, let's focus on what we can control. And when you look at it like that, all of a sudden throughout the day, there are certain aspects of, hey, maybe I can't control that McDonald's is the only place I eat at, but I can control what I order off the menu. And, okay, here, let's give you a restaurant guide to find the healthiest options at McDonald's or any other fast food restaurant out on the road. Or, hey, I can't control that, I might not have a refrigerator in my truck, but I can control, here's a grocery store list of non-refrigerable items that I can stock my truck up with. And really just giving them, the resources that meet them where they're at and giving them the way just to make that healthier decision at all these different times throughout the day that doesn't seem like that big of a shift. But when they add up and done consistently, after 20 years on the road, you're looking at two different people. And that's the mindset that we try to have. And then that third pillar of accountability is honestly something that I think is the magic of all of this, because I think everyone lacks accountability in a lot of things they do. And we're really focused on, like I said earlier, building that relationship with the driver, having that onboarding call. We also send a weekly check-in text message, based off of your utilization of saying, hey, Charlotte, you haven't signed in the app this week. What do we need to do to get you back on here? Or, hey, you've crushed the last 2 workouts. Awesome job. Is there anything else we can do for you? And really just showing them that it's not just this computer telling them what to do, but there's an actual human behind the screen. And I think that goes a long way with drivers. And also giving them the ability and access to message one of our coaches 24/7 throughout our app. And then we have an awesome community of drivers in our app as well. And just getting them in a positive environment goes a long way too.
Yeah. Oh, I love all 3 of those pillars. I think as you were talking through, I could remember conversations with drivers I've had already on the podcast. A lot of those, like you said, small changes. It's amazing what happens long term. And I've seen this with my husband, but I've heard these stories in the people that I've spoken with that have been on the podcast so far. Accountability, that's huge across the board for myself included. Sometimes if I just can say it out loud to people, because I really honor even if I say I'm going to do something, I really try to honor my word. So if I say it, that's a huge level of accountability, just getting it out loud instead of keeping it to myself. Those are great. Now, I know that you and I talked about this, and your company, you target the organization, so trucking companies, so that all of their drivers then benefit. Is that the primary focus? Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I know there's a whole section of the industry of owner operators and small fleets that, need the help as well. And so we do some stuff with individual drivers, and you can sign up on our website individually. But our main focus is working with trucking companies and also insurance companies, because I think that honestly, everyone wins if drivers are healthier. And I think that there's a lot of skin in the game and honestly ability for the insurance companies and trucking companies to come in and create that culture of health and fitness, similar to safety culture, where yes, drivers should have, as much care about safety, in their day-to-day life as the company does, but the company really tries to instill the safety culture as well. And I think in 5 years from now, there's going to be very similar conversations company to company about the health of drivers as well, because I think that there's just so much to lose for the companies and especially insurance companies as well, for having, a group of unhealthy drivers in their fleet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much like you, team prevention. So as a public health doctor, I'm always advocating for preventive methods and prevention. Yep. So in a moment, we're going to share contact information so that, your companies and insurance people and connections can listen. But for right now, the listeners, I would love for you to share a couple of tips, if it's a nutrition tip or exercise tip or something that a driver listening right now could maybe take away and apply or be useful for them. Is there anything or a couple of things that come to mind that you could share?
Yeah. So from an exercise standpoint, if you're a driver, honestly, anyone out there, doing something consistently matters a lot more than what activity you decide to do. And at the end of the day, it's about moving more. So pick something that you enjoy doing. If it's going out on a walk, if it's, like I said earlier, there's a million different exercise options, or, if you want to call it exercising, you just want to call it moving. But really at the end of the day, it's about finding that starting spot, get started, and just doing something. And when you start doing something and you do it consistently, the other details will come about. You'll figure it out. But a lot of people try to work on step 9, 10, 11 before they just get started on step 1. And so that's what I would really focus on there. And then on the nutrition side of things, start with one change as well. You don't have to, look up this meal plan or join Jenny Craig or, do this huge change. You can start with just one change. If it's, hey, I want to nail breakfast every morning, or I want to stock my truck up and eat a healthy snack in the afternoon when I typically grab the bag of Doritos, whatever that change is. I'll tell one story to kind of end it off of, one of the drivers that we had, and he was actually a part of the beta group as well, that during the initial onboarding call, I say, hey, where do you feel like's the biggest thing holding you back right now in your day-to-day life from, hitting your goals? He wanted to lose some weight. And, something that he said was every single day he drinks 2 12-packs of Pepsi while driving on the highway. 24 sodas. I don't even know if that's physically possible, but that's what he told me. And he was drinking a lot of sodas. And, what we did was just slow and steady start cutting down and making some changes. Started with slowly cutting down the number of actual sodas he was drinking and making some switches to diet sodas or some other 0-calorie beverages. And, after a couple of weeks, after a couple of months, he now doesn't drink any soda. He does drink some other, flavored beverages. I think he drinks some coffee in the morning and maybe a diet soda here or there. But just from that one change alone, he dropped 20 pounds. He felt more energetic. He was controlling his blood sugar so much better. And that's an example of, Ron didn't go and, do this huge exercise routine, make this huge change to what he was eating. All he changed was what he was drinking throughout the day while driving. And I tell that story because, a lot of people listening are probably not drinking 24 sodas throughout the day. But even if it's, 3 or 4, that's a couple hundred calories a day that you're drinking. And, making a switch here or there, where it cuts out a couple of hundred calories or cuts out all the soda, and maybe you're just drinking 0-calorie beverages, that adds up really quickly. And that one change can start, getting the ball rolling or the tires turning, for the trucking reference out there, and just get you on the path towards, that end goal.
Yeah, I love that example because I was thinking about that as well. There's so many stories I've heard of people making the switch, like changing sodas and drinking water instead, or drinking sodas only on the weekend instead of the weekday. But those small changes, you're right, huge rewards. And then you're excited. The momentum is forward. You're feeling, much more confident. You're seeing some progress, and then you're ready to incorporate the next thing, after that becomes second nature. Great tips. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So for someone listening and interested in learning more about, your services for their company or maybe their owner operator, and they're or small fleet, and they just want to learn more about how, they could possibly work with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so supplychainfitness.com is our website. On all social medias, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Supply Chain Fitness. If you look it up, we post a ton of great content. And then if you are on LinkedIn, send me a connection, Dr. Mark Manera, and I'd love to have a conversation about, if you're a driver, have a conversation with you about, hey, how can you start making some changes? Or if you're a company, let's talk about, how we can start shifting the narrative of health and fitness for your fleet.
Wonderful. Well, Mark, thank you for taking some time and coming on the podcast and sharing I've been taking notes while you were talking, by the way. So you shared a lot of really good stuff here, and I know our listeners really appreciate you. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Conversations in Trucking podcast. Learn more or be a guest on a future episode by visiting healthyconversationsinTrucking.com or simply HCITpodcast.com.